Strip it, strip it, strip it, strip it. Strip it. All right, leave it, leave it, leave it. Strip, 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 strip. Bump it. He's coming, he's coming, he's coming.
Oh my gosh.
He got it. Nice. Nice. All right, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Redfish Podcast. And we're going to do things a little bit differently this time. This is kind of what I wanted this to get to eventually. Turned into a lot of policy and, you know, a lot of talking about meetings and wildlife fisheries and this, that, and the other thing over the past year. But obviously, I'm going to keep with the same thing and get back to doing the different segments and all that stuff that people like. And today I actually have Al Perkinson from Bajio. And you're creator of Bajio, mastermind of Bajio, CEO, whatever you want to call him. That's what he is. He's the guy behind Bajio. So we're going to talk obviously about how Bajio started and what Bajio is as far as what they do in sunglasses. But I was more interested, especially when I first got involved with Bajio, of kind of their mission was, you know, protect the shallows, which is pretty damn cool. And we'll talk about it a little bit in this podcast, and you've heard me talk about it. And especially about everybody that knows me knows, you know, I mean, in this day and age we're in of everybody wanting stuff for free and sponsor this and pro staff that and all. At the end of the day, everybody hears it from me all the time. I don't really care about who anybody is, what anybody makes. If they want to get on this train of helping me keep this fishery around for the next 20 years, you know, to where I can someday bring Waylon and Maverick to enjoy what I've gotten to enjoy, even if it's, you know, fractions of what it's been in my life. If it's as good as it is right now in 20 years and I get to enjoy it with them and pass it down to them, then that's why I'm doing this. And that's where all this comes from. And anybody that wants to get behind that, they usually make pretty awesome shit too. And you'll see in this interview with Al and a little bit about what we talk about is why Bajio's been so successful the past couple of years. But I'll let y'all get to it. As always, I love seeing those hashtags out there. One for Louisiana. Keep that up. And then let me know how this goes. Let me know how you like it. If you want to hear some more people, throw me some recommendations in the email, the Redfish Podcast at gmail.com. And I'll be hearing from you soon. Thank you.
I'm Al Perkinson and founder and head of Bajio Sunglasses. And I've been working, you know, in the outdoor industry and fishing for a long time, probably like 20 years or maybe more. And the main thing that I did over, you know, from 2000 to 2015 or 16 was I ran all the brand and marketing for Costa Sunglasses. And, you know, really it was not so much about selling sunglasses, although that was obviously a big part, as it was about having a mission and being able to do some really cool stuff with helping the environment and specifically around fishing. And so we really accomplished a lot over that time period. But, you know, all good things must come to an end. And we were bought by this giant Italian company, and another French company was part of that as well. And, you know, I could just see the writing on the wall that our mission and purpose was not going to be supported by these guys like we had done it before. And so I decided to leave and went out to Montana, worked for Sims for a couple of years. And, you know, they were like, hey, come on out and do the conservation thing and, you know, make Sims into a cool brand like you did at Costa. But then I got out there and realized that, you know, this company was run by some finance guys. And really, they just wanted to do a fix and flip type of situation. They've since sold the company for a lot of money, but they weren't really into the conservation mindset. And, you know, I love to just integrate it into everything that we do. And they just weren't willing to do that and to pay the price for that. So I did some consulting for a bit. Excuse me, did some consulting for a bit, and worked with Orvis and a couple of other big brands. Uh, trying to get them to adopt the same type of philosophy and mindset. Orvis does a ton of stuff, and so they were receptive to it. But long story short, what my wife and I realized was that, look, if we want to build a company that really puts conservation in the center of what it's all about, then we're going to have to start our own company and do it ourselves. We can't try to force other people into adopting our set of beliefs. And so I remember we were in Charleston and the pandemic was just about to start. We didn't know that at the time. And, we just kind of took a deep breath. We didn't have any money to speak of. We didn't, it's not like we had this big pile of money that we could invest and start a new company with, but we just kind of did it on faith and knowing that, hey, we had a bunch of people who might support us with it, something that we wanted to do. So we started Bajio, and then, the pandemic hit, and it was a bit of a struggle for a little bit there, but we were able to successfully launch it, and it's taken off, and it's doing really well. And so that's kind of the how we got to where we are.
Yeah.
Is I think it's just our desire to use business to fund a lot of good stuff. And I really believe, I strongly believe that there's the joke. They asked the guy, one of the most famous bank robbers in the world. He'd robbed hundreds of banks, and they asked him why he robbed banks, and he said, well, because that's where the money is. And that made a lot of sense to me. And I think why do businesses need to support conservation is because that's where the money is. We can go to governments, we can go to individuals, and but really, if we want to make a difference, the businesses have to step up and really drive this conversation for not only conservation and environmental issues, but for social issues. Because that's where the power is, that's where the money is, and that if it can be steered towards good, then we'll all be much better off.
And that was one of my biggest things with Bahio in general. I was just so impressed by that mentality of we're a sunglass company second. We're trying to save our ecosystem, environment, and fisheries first, and that was kind of something that struck me because, like I was just telling you beforehand, is right around that COVID time frame was when we really started getting some more data and science going on with Louisiana down here, showing that, hey, we need to protect this because just like you're saying, kind of like that's where the money is at. I mean, it's perfect to say that because that's where the money is at. Because without that, what do we have? What are you selling sunglasses to if there's no fishery? What are you selling, any fishing things to if there's nobody fishing because either the environment can't sustain it, the fisheries crash. I mean, that's the biggest thing behind all this, and just like what you said about companies getting behind it, and I think we've seen a turn of it for sure, especially the last couple of years. But I feel like it needs to be a bigger thing in all these companies. I mean, some people, I call it, the Facebook conservationists. Sometimes you get people and they just, they want to put up for the show, and then you come to them about some of these issues, and they're like, oh, well, we don't really want to take that hard of a stance on that. And I used to be like, oh, okay, I understand it. You don't really want to be so one-sided towards content. And then a couple of years ago, I sat by and I watched what was going on here in Louisiana and how much we needed to step up and do something no matter what. And whenever I got that response, I was like, you know what? See ya. I want nothing to do with you. I don't care what you make, sell, who you work with, nothing. Because at the end of the day, you don't have anything or anybody to sell to unless you get behind this and protect this stuff. And that's one thing I was so impressed about you. And I've heard you talk at a few other podcasts too. One in particular, I remember I think April Vokey, and you said a few things like that. And I was just so impressed at, of course, you talk highly of Bahio and you talk about kind of what makes everything work and all. But I was so impressed at where it came from, and I truly feel like, and I haven't seen that from a lot of other people before, not just companies, but people, that want to stand up and stand behind stuff, was that you're truly passionate about, like, this is our mission first, and if we can make some money and provide a cool product like sunglasses for somebody second, then that's awesome. And that's, I can't think of any companies around the world that are really that have taken that stance that strongly. And that's something I truly commend.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I think you just have to do what turns you on, and just making money, it just to make money and to buy a bunch of stuff, and um, it just doesn't turn me on that much. It seems selfish and kind of self-centered. So what I do love to do is to give and to help people, and I get a lot of personal joy out of that. And Marguerite and I both feel the same way, and she's my wife, and you know, we we wanted to we could have supported anything, I guess, with Bahio, but we wanted to do something that we believed in and that we enjoyed. So we asked ourselves, what's the thing that we love to do the most? And we said, hey, if we're sitting in a panga in beautiful water, casting to tail and fish, we're in heaven, right? That is what we love to do. And so we said, well, let's make this company about that. So we called it Bajio, and that means the shallows. And so that was a start. And then obviously we will sell to anybody who wants to buy the glasses, and the broader fishing community certainly has embraced us, and we love to do all kinds of fishings. But at the apex is that flats fishing, and we know so many people in these little villages and um, coastal towns around the Yucatan or the Bahamas or whatever. And a lot of those folks have been exploited over the years by Europeans and others, and we have empathy for them, and we want to help them as well. And then we see young people who just get turned on, when they get exposed to fishing and to traveling. They really, they get turned on to it. They get excited. They get fulfilled about it. And so what we're trying to do is just kind of combine all of those things together and see if fishing can't be sort of the vehicle and um, you know, the magic of all of it. And we kind of look at our fishing rods as like a magic wand, and we try to touch it on the fish and make them better, and the people and make them better, and the young people and make them better. And fishing really is magical that way. I mean, I can't think of anything else that it reaches such a broad range of people: poor people, rich people, old people, young people, professional athletes, musicians. I mean, that when you find out that somebody fishes, it's like a common bond that you have. And it immediately gives you something to talk about. And so I just think fishing can reach so many people, it can touch so many people. And so if we don't use it for what it can do, then, we're not really living up to our responsibility. I think, and like you said, I mean, without fish, there's no fishermen. Without fishermen, there's no customers to buy your product. So if you're in the fishing industry and you're a company, um, if you're not supporting conservation, you're just a taker, and who likes takers, man? You got to be a giver. You got to give back and support and be part of the community, and make things happen. And honestly, I believe that one of the changes that's occurred over the last 15 or 20 years is the influx of financial people into the fishing community, buying and selling companies. And so if you go down the list of companies and you just say, hey, are you like run by the person who started you, the entrepreneur? Are you privately held? or are you part of a private equity group, or are you part of some big conglomerate, um, you'd be amazed at how few fishing companies are now, uh, run by the people who started them, and how many are run by these giant companies whose only motivation is profit.
Hmm.
And most of them have a short-term mindset of wanting to hit quarterly earnings or fix and flip. And there's just no room for mission in those types of companies and those types of environments. So we have got to keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive within fishing, the fishing community. We've got to support those companies, those brands that are independent. And I'm not saying that to be self-serving. I'm just saying that because uh, that's what it takes to support conservation. My hero is Yvon Chouinard at Patagonia.
Hmm.
And the only reason that Patagonia has been able to maintain that focus over the years is ownership structure. Has been owned by Yvon Chouinard this whole time. And he could have sold it for billions of dollars, but he gave it to not for profit. So it was ensured that it would continue to support conservation forever. And that's the kind of stuff that we got to do. That's
Yeah, I
that's
mean
what we
that's
have to do.
that's bigger than people there. That's securing a future for not just like things like Patagonia and all, but the future of fisheries and I mean you're spot on with it all. I love it. I mean, like I told you before, we do a lot of talking on this podcast. Um, we do a lot of indirectly calling people out and saying kind of what needs to be said because there's a lot of people. I mean, I'm not just talking about podcasts. There's videos, there's podcasts, there's TV shows. There's a lot of people that just, at the end of the day, they're doing something for a sponsor. They're selling something, and like that's like I told you, why we started this thing a couple of years or last year and started kind of this whole battle with the redfish stuff was like, hey, there's some stuff that needs to be said, and I don't make a dollar off of anything, so I don't really care. Like here's the thing that
Right.
needs to happen, and I love that. Like I mean, you're spot on about the whole fishing industry. I mean, I've been doing this for quite a while now. I mean, and not just the walleye fisheries side of stuff, but guiding and fishing. And I've been in the industry. I've worked with Cabela's and Bass Pro and all them, and I've seen that. I've seen like, hey, let me offer my 2 cents on what we should do to, support this thing that's going on in Louisiana. And they're like, oh, you got to send this in the corporate. Then if they approve it, you do this, and then you got to fill out this and see this person. I'm like, man, I'm just trying to, we're just doing this trash cleanup. I'm just trying to get y'all to share it on social media or something like that. And I think that's the disconnect that needs to be fostered kind of in a new direction real soon. And I feel like I've seen that more the past couple years. I feel like, and I mean, whether it's for the right reason or not, I say all help is the help we need towards conservation. But you see some people, I think some of these companies too have realized, hey, conservation's the new dollar bill. Let's do that, and whether they're putting on a front or not, I mean, I'm not going to knock them for doing it, but I just really love to recognize people like y'all that are like actually doing it, and things like you said, like this was something, the whole company came from a need and a want to help people and places that you love to be and fish and all that. So I mean, it's super awesome. But one thing I'd like to go into too is kind of more about you and kind of your fishing background. What did you get into when you were a kid, fishing all the way till now?
Yeah, sure. I guess I've fished ever since I was, you know, too young to know how old I was. I guess, we we love to. I grew up in the South, so I grew up in North Carolina. We moved to Tennessee, to Memphis when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and then Mississippi and back to North Carolina. So always in the South, and so you know there was always like the bass pond. My friends would their dad might have some land out in the country, and so we could go out there and fish in these old bass ponds. And my dad wasn't a fisherman, and so I didn't have anybody to learn from really, just the random person. But I have three younger brothers, and the one who's right under me, he loved to fish too, and so the two of us would just explore and figure it out ourselves, and try to talk our dad. And we were down at the beach, try to talk him into giving us $5 to buy some bloodworms, because bloodworms were magic.
That's
And
awesome.
and sometimes you would, sometimes you wouldn't. But yeah, just grew up freshwater with little bass ponds, and catching crappie and bluegills and stuff. And then we'd go down to the beach for vacation and go out on the pier. And my brother and I would just spend the entire vacation on the pier and watch all the dudes, off the end of the pier. You'd see schools of pogies coming down, and there'd be kingfish that would come up and bust into them. Kingfish and sharks were the biggest fish that
Hmm.
got caught. It was a whole process, man. And we were just thought those dudes on the end of the dock were freaking gods. They were just heroes. They had all the shit, um, all the gear and all the technique, and we would just watch them and soak it up. And sometimes the we go down and you just don't know what week you're gonna get or when the fish are gonna show up. But
Hmm.
occasionally we did a Spanish mackerel run, and just cast these little plugs out there, and and catch a ton of those. Sometimes it's sheephead on the pylons, and
Hmm.
mostly it was just like spots and whitings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was all kind of lower level stuff, all as we were young and growing up. And we loved to go out in the woods. We loved to explore and and do all that. So we had a creek behind our house, and we just tore that creek up, catching bullfrogs and snapping turtles and salamanders and all that kind of stuff. So that was our life growing up. Um, and so I've always just loved nature and loved fishing. It wasn't though until I got to Costa in like 2000. So I was probably in early 40s at that time, and got the opportunity to do some incredible stuff. And I'd always loved to watch fishing shows on TV. And
Hmm.
Bill Dance lived right down the street. He'd come out and give us trade lures for papers.
Wow, that's
And
awesome.
he took us in Bill Dance's house. And back then he lived in a little bungalow thing, not big at all, and just had all these fish mounts all over the inside of it in his den and stuff.
Wow.
And we were just like, oh my God, this Bill Dance's house with all this stuff. But yeah, and then Flip Pallet, and his show was just like, you know, music to my ears. The
Hmm.
poetry he would write, and then his voiceover. I think he had the American Sportsman's guys
Hmm.
who would write for him, and Kurt Gowdy was another hero of mine. American Sportsman, that show, I never missed an episode of that show. It was
Yeah.
incredible. So when I finally got to actually fly fish on the flats, uh, like Flip Pallet had done, I was like, oh my God, I hope I'm going to enjoy this as much as I want to. And I got out there, I'm like, dude, this is just as good as I always dreamed it would be. This is so amazing. And then after that, I just kind of wanted to saltwater fly fish all the time.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, still love to offshore, still love to do freshwater, everything. And Marguerite and I love to catch species we've never caught before, and just always try new things. But that saltwater flats fishing, Flip Pallet was just you know turned me on to that, and then to get to meet him and fish with him. I mean, goodness gracious, that doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So, so yeah, that's what we were lucky enough that we have at this point fished, kind of all over the world, and hadn't done a lot in Asia, but definitely want to do that.
Oh wow.
But we fished all over South America.
Hmm.
primarily, and all over the Caribbean and the United States and Canada and Alaska and all these places, and just feel very, very lucky. Since we started Bajio, haven't done as much fishing because I will tell you, starting a company from scratch, some freaking work. It's
Yeah, I could only imagine, man. The problem
seven
is
days
the
a week.
problem is you don't have that private equity firm of 30, people in an office doing everything.
Nah, we do everything ourselves,
Yeah.
but it makes it that much sweeter, though.
Oh, for
Uh,
sure.
yeah,
It's hard to
but
beat and feeling like you earned it like that, and then accomplishing kind of what you set out to do, which is pretty awesome. And then getting to fish on the side a little bit. I mean, you can't really beat that. But no, that's pretty
yeah,
awesome. I mean, I love that. What's one of your favorite places that you've been fishing? And it doesn't even have to be the fish itself, but like, what's one of the coolest just fishing experiences, places, or whatever that you went on before?
well, I mean, there's a couple. There's certain places that the whole process of fishing is just different, and
Hmm.
it's really, really unique, and the place is unique. I One of those is definitely the Devils down in South Texas, and that some friends of mine took me there, and these folks had an old rundown house on the river, and we stayed there for several days and fished that river, and that river is just you know parts of it look like a trout stream in the mountains, part of it look like a flat in the Bahamas, and you're catching largemouth bass and smallmouth, and the smallmouth come across the flat look like a bonefish, and I caught a huge one down there that would have been the state record. We don't really apply for stuff like that, but 6.5 pound smallmouth on fly with a big old black woolly booger kind of thing
Oh
that the
wow.
guide made up. And but that whole place was just unlike any place I'd ever seen. And you know, it was like limestone and then super clear water on top of that.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and then another one was down in Baja and doing the rooster fish fishing, where it's like a total team kind of deal. And you're cruising down the beach, and you see the roosters, and one person has the teaser, and they throw it out and bring them close, and then you pitch to them with the fly rod, and you are running down the man, as Frank Smether's film was about that. But you know, I don't know how people who aren't in fairly decent shape can do it, because you run for miles, and then you look back and there's your golf cart way, way back
Oh
there, and you go
wow.
like,
That's crazy.
uh, but it was really different and really fun to do that, and then obviously Guyana fishing for arapaima um, over several year period where
Oh
we
yeah.
developed that fish from scratch, and nobody had ever caught an arapaima on fly before, and nobody had ever fished in this place before. So the opportunity to just, with some Oliver White and some other anglers to really figure it out, for these gigantic, 6 to 8 foot long fish who are living in these ponds in the middle of the rainforest. That was a pretty cool experience too.
Yeah, that's incredible. I remember kind of when I first started seeing those videos of y'all doing that down there. It was the first I've ever heard about arapaima and stuff like that. And I was like, geez, I don't even care how, where, or when, but that fish looks just incredible. Just like a tarpon living in little jungle areas that looks more mean and pissed off than any tarpon I've ever seen. I mean, that was just always so cool. I was like, man, I'd love to throw some kind of top water on, do that, or throw a fly at one. That's a super cool fish. I've always said like people have them in tanks and all down here, and when I was down in South Florida years ago, I remember seeing one in an aquarium. I was like, that fish is just wild. Like that, geez, that thing is just it's like an alien. But
It's
that's
so
really cool.
powerful. You cast to it and start stripping it in, and then you hook it. And these things are the apex predators. They've never had anything except humans mess with them.
Hmm.
And so you're stripping it towards the boat, and it's not a super like stable boat because it's a dugout canoe that you're fishing from. And then the fish, they're like dogs, like they have the awareness level and the intelligence
Hmm.
of like a dog. So they look at you,
Oh,
and
wow.
you know they're looking at you. So you're stripping, and you're bringing it. You've hooked him. You bring him to the boat, and then he sort of comes up and lifts his head, and he looks at you, and then he just turns and has this powerful tail and like splashes water in the entire boat. You were literally soaked, and then almost pulls you off of the boat, going,
Jeez.
"See you later, man." And then he comes up out of the water, and this giant fish is like thrashing and jumping and stuff.
That's wild.
Um, and you look around, and you're like, I mean, in the middle of, you have to fly an airplane 2.5 hours into the rainforest, land on a
Jeez.
dirt runway, and then take a boat for 3 hours to get to this place.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
there's
wild.
nothing around but wilderness and wild stuff. And you're out there catching this monster prehistoric fish. It's pretty sick. It's
Yeah,
really
that's
cool.
incredible.
Well, I was just going to say the conservation, part of that story is really cool. And because and the those fish got poached and fished to near extinction in that area. So they
Oh,
were
wow.
fished that they thought that maybe there was 4 or 5 thousand of those fish left, whereas before there had been tens of thousands of those
Hmm.
things. Uh, and the gigantic ones, the ones that they measure the fish by how many people it takes to hold one. And so these 6 or 7 people lined up with
Jeez.
holding this one giant fish in the pictures. So those guys were gone. And so we came in, and what was happening was the Brazilians were coming up and poaching and paying the local villagers to catch these fish and paying them, $1 a pound or just nothing. And so the fish were going away. And so we came in and in an effort to protect the fish, we knew we had to get the local villagers in support of it. And so this one little village, Riwa, they had already decided that they were going, to conserve this fish so that their kids and their grandkids would be able to see it, and they would conserve the other wildlife. So they stopped poaching, even though it was their only form of income. And they didn't need a lot of money, but they did need some for, like, kids would get sick and have to take them to Georgetown to the hospital or whatever. So these guys, they just decided that they would stop without any prospect of any future income for anything, and
Wow.
because it was the right thing to do. And so I heard about that story from a friend of mine who had been in there with a photographer taking some pictures. I'm like, man, I got to go meet these guys. And so we went out there and met these guys, and it was almost instantly I was like, are you kidding me? This could be an incredible like fishing operation where people could come in and catch these fish. The village could make money and catch and release and all of that. Um, and so we started the whole program, and it was kind of funny, crazy story. Not take up too much time on it, but we were we were late in the season when we got down there. So it's a rainy season, and when the rains come, the water rises in the river 20 or 30 feet
Jeez.
and floods the village. And so the water was coming up, and when the water's coming up, the fish stop biting because the arapaima come out into the river, swim around, and then after the water goes down, they go back. So we were fishing around and trying to catch. We were spin tackle fishing to start with.
Hmm.
We weren't fly fishing at that point. Um, but my buddy was like, "Look, you just got to catch one of these fish, and you'll see like how cool they are." And there's all these other fish. There's pyar and all piranha and all these other ones. Um, and so there was one bait fish that these arapaima like to eat, and we could not catch one anywhere. We set up nets out in the water, um, and we could not get one. So we couldn't catch a fish. And it was the next to last day before we were leaving to go back. And we were paddling through, this sort of swampy area. And all of a sudden, this fish jumps out of the water and jumps in our boat. And it's a little bait fish, and it's the bait fish that the arapaima
Oh, wow.
like. So I hooked it on, went out and caught the arapaima with that fish that jumped in our boat.
That's so cool.
And and Uncle Fred, who we were talking about before, the
Mm.
84-year-old guy, he was like, "That's the owner of the pond did that. That was meant to be." I'm like, "The owner of the pond?" He's like, "Yeah, it's each pond has an owner. It's a god that looks over the pond,
Oh, wow.
and he wanted you to catch that fish, so he put that bait in this boat." So then we went back to the village. I was like, "Man, we gotta make a sport fishing lodge here." And we got the chiefs of all the little villages together. We had a big meeting, and it happened super fast. And they're like, "Okay, so you're going to come back and build a fishing lodge here." I'm like, "Well, I didn't mean that I was going to do it, but I guess I have to, because now, it's put the idea out there and you saw the need and all that kind of stuff." So over the next few years, we came back and gradually built up that business to the point where it employs almost everybody in the whole village now. And importantly, they have adopted conservation as a mindset. And they didn't understand it before. Now, the last time I went, this woman was walking me around. And she goes, "Al, these are our fish now. And if anybody comes and tries to take our fish, we will fight them. These are our fish. They are taking care of our village. And, you know, we are dedicated to protecting them forever." And
That's awesome.
and so that was really, really a cool thing to hear. But it just shows you that the local people, they have to buy in to conservation, and they have to be the drivers of the whole thing. Without them, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of the thing, that we've dealt with here. And I tell people, and we've finally had the first change in our creel limits for redfish in 35 years, which is only the second change ever in the history of Louisiana, which is just crazy when people hear that. Especially people from Florida and Texas. They've seen things go back and forth, change all the time. But that's one of my biggest things is just the change in mentality. And I've like I was telling you before, when I was a kid, it was all about how many boxes of fish, how many we got to get our limit of speckled trout or something super fast, and it was a mentality change for me, and it really came from redfish for me. I was like, man, it's really cool to go and sight fish these redfish, especially when I was getting into college and high school and all, and driving around, and I just thought it was so cool. I'm like, oh, I can go catch this fish right by my house, from the land, ride my bike to it when I was in high school and all. And we catch a redfish from the bank. And for one, I grew up with the mentality of like, we didn't really eat them that much because, just because people didn't like them. They wanted speckled trout and all. But then two, I was like, man, it was really cool and really fun to sight fish that fish or just catch that redfish in general on a top water. Or we used to always throw those gold spoons, the Cleos with treble hooks from the banks on Lake Pontchartrain all the time. And it kind of clicked in my head. I was like, man, if I let this go, for one, I don't really like cleaning fish all that much. I don't really want to eat it tonight. And two, if I let it go, I can catch it tomorrow maybe or another day. And I think it kind of clicked for me earlier than some people. And I see it click for a lot of people. And really the past couple of years, I've definitely seen that mentality change a bit towards that, because people are, over this whole battle with the creel limits, people are like, oh, we need to do this and it's going to fix everything. And I'm like, no, this is not yes, we can change the law, we can do things, but we have to fix the mentality first. We have to change the mentality and make people realize these fish are worth far more than just to be laid out on a dock, for some Facebook picture or whatever, because it's definitely become an ego thing. I mean, when I was a kid, and reading magazines in Louisiana and seeing the early days of like the blogs and just pictures up on a wall in the bait shops and all. It was all about look how many fish that guy has laid out on the dock. He's an awesome guy. And that was the thing. And now, I mean, I'm seeing it too. And you talk to clients and all that come down here. I'm like, oh, well, y'all had a great time. Like, oh, it was a great time. It was awesome. We caught a bunch of fish. And I'll ask them, maybe it's pretty recent that they went, or maybe they haven't gone since last year. And I'm like, oh, well, how many fish did y'all keep? And they're like, even if they kept fish, they're like, oh, we don't really remember, but, we caught this one really big one. And then, my son fought it forever. And whoever it was, Captain Ben or somebody that they went with, they're like, oh, and then we let it go. It was so cool. And they even tagged it too. And I always tell people that's what people remember. And I try to explain to some of these guys who are like, oh, this is my business. I have to go and lay out a bunch of fish on the dock because it's my business. I'm like, look, let me put it to you this way. That picture you took of all them fish laid on the dock, or that picture of that family or whoever holding this one, fish that they really big fish or whatever, who knows if y'all kept it or let it go. Which picture are they going to hang on their mantle and show everybody at Christmas time when people come over? Because it surely ain't going to be the 100 fish laid out on the dock. It's going to be you holding that one fish or, whatever it was with their family. And that's kind of the mentality changes I've seen for the better. We're still kind of, like I told you, we're still kind of far behind the line over here in Louisiana. I mean, everywhere else in the country has definitely been stepped up more than us. But I'm glad we're seeing it, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing from when you were a kid, kind of that mentality and change. And I think, like you said, you've seen it change in the industry the past 10 or 15 years. And I mean, have you seen the same thing since you were a kid, pretty much?
For sure. I mean, it was all about, having a stringer and seeing how many fish you get on the stringer. Uh, the thing was, half the time, I mean, we would clean all the fish, try to fillet them, and totally butcher the things, and get my mom to cook them up. But that was like they didn't taste that good, and it was just kind of a mess. But that was the mentality for sure. And but I have seen the mentality change in a lot of different situations. We used to work with this woman named Joan Vernon. She was married to Captain Harry, who has a legendary shop down in South Florida. And when she started with billfish conservation, all the tournaments used J hooks, and it was they were kill tournaments. And she is like one person, and she went around all up and down the coast of South America, all the way into the Gulf into Florida, and she convinced these tournaments to use circle hooks instead of J hooks. And the mortality rate for circle hooks is close to zero. And the J hooks they would swallow and all that. And so she converted all of those fishermen who were like, look, if I don't use a J hook, I'm not going to catch as many fish. And she proved to them they could catch more fish on circle hooks than they could on the J hooks. And so I can't think of a tournament that's not a circle hook required tournament now. And she was one lady who did that. And I think also of Trout Unlimited and what they're doing, out west. We went out and spent some time with some of the people who worked for them out there. And these ranchers, they have a mentality traditionally that's similar probably to the folks down in Louisiana. They're just kind of old school, and it's my land and it's my water rights. And out there, it's about keeping water in the streams. And so there's a lot of the farmers, because they didn't want to lose their water rights, they would just turn their sprinklers on and use all the water that they were allotted. So if you don't lose it, use it, you lose it, was the mentality. And Trout Unlimited was able to sit down with these farmers, and in one particular area where we were, convince them all to give up a little bit of their water rights so that their children and grandchildren could have enjoy the trout fishing in those streams going forward, future generations. And they all came together and they did it. And nobody ever thought that you could convince them otherwise. Uh, there's always factions, and sometimes it's sort of, cause versus commerce. I know the net ban treaty that we supported early on in Florida, where, with redfish and speckled trout and snook, they would just put a net across the mouth of the creek and just net the heck out of all of them, pretty much wiping them out.
Hmm.
And so when the net ban went into effect, I mean, there were death threats, there was fighting. Um,
Yeah,
you
when
know,
when they
we
banned gill nets down here, I mean the gill netters were literally going down a road, Delacroix, Hopedale, Venice, all that, and they were throwing nails and slashing tires and cutting
yeah.
trailers in half. I mean, it was a big ordeal then,
Well, and you can sympathize with those folks whose livelihood is threatened, and that's all
for
they know
sure.
how to do is commercial fish, and they've got kids too.
Hmm.
So solutions have to be made that that take care of that. I mean, if we're buying up licenses and you know paying them for their license so that they can then start on another business, whatever the solution might be. But I have seen a big shift in people's mentality. Anglers overall, hunters as well. We used to be, it was a macho thing, and it was like us against nature.
Hmm.
So we're going to go out and we're going to conquer nature. We're going to catch the biggest fish. We're going to shoot the biggest lion or elephant because we're the great white hunter, and we're going to show, Ernest Hemingway catching the huge marlin on in Cuba and stuff like that. Um, but now I think the overall role of the angler and the hunter has shifted dramatically. And instead of being, sort of the apex predator, we are the caregiver. And so we're having to assume the role of primary caregiver and taking care because we've seen that if we don't, um, and it doesn't look good in the future. So I do think overall you see that shift and that mentality has changed, but there are still pockets, still holdouts, and I think they'll come along eventually because the logic of it just makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I mean that's what I tell people. When I first started this whole like, yeah, we got to do something to change it, and the biologists working their butts off over there always talk so highly of our biologists at Walleye Fisheries because they've done such a damn good job, and it's been proven now how good of a job they've done on stock assessments and everything. I mean, they're like leading the country in it, and I worked up there in that building too, and I watched a lot of things get shot down, a lot of awesome projects, get pushed around because of, political means or whatever. And I kind of was like, years ago, it was really right around like COVID and all. I had some time, obviously. We didn't have anybody traveling to come fish. So it was like fishing was really good. And I just was fishing and thinking. And I was like, you know what? I had watched the numbers, and from my background of knowing the numbers and the science on our fisheries, I was like, we're not invincible. This is not something we can't hurt. Because if you'd have told me there was going to be a day where I wouldn't see 1,000 redfish every single day and you could hurt them, I'd have laughed. I'd have been like, "Oh, you're crazy, man. You can't hurt this." And then seeing it for myself and kind of looking at the numbers before it really started going downwards a little bit. And on this podcast too, people always tell me like, "Oh, why are you so doom and gloom about stuff? It's still so awesome." I'm like, "Yes, it is. It's spectacular." Louisiana, I don't know where else you can have as good of a day red fishing as you can here, but it can be so much better. And that's my thing is like, it can be so much better, so why not make it better? Why not just get by with, "Oh, it's good enough"? Like that's crap to me. I think it needs to be as good as it can be. And I kind of was like, you know what? I'm tired of hearing they're not going to listen to you. Oh, well, this company doesn't want you to do that. This organization doesn't agree with that. And I was like, you know what? I don't really care. If I got to go by myself to these meetings and piss people off and be the squeaky wheel, I don't care how long it takes. I mean, eventually something's going to happen. And we did. Some people got behind it. A lot of people saw it. And I mean, I was quite impressed with it. I think, like I said, we got something done, and while it wasn't as much as we wanted, it was something, and it definitely helped. And I think all those people who have been negative towards this really said, "Oh shit, we're not going to get whatever we want for the rest of our time here." And I think that was, if anything, that was the message I think we needed to send, and allow something for people to kind of get behind. You get a few wins, and people are like, okay, I wasn't wrong to think like that. Those guys actually did something, so let's do that. But I just got one or two quick points we'll get at real quick that I thought were just cool, entertaining stuff from at least what y'all have done. As far as industry and like in sunglasses and stuff. But if you want, we'll go through kind of, has anything changed sunglasses wise much over the lifetime that I mean, you've been in this industry. I'd say it's fair to say longer than any freaking body else I've ever met for sure. As far as eyewear goes, I mean, what have you seen as far as eyewear and things of that nature change? Because at the end of the day, sunglasses are number one on my list. We're not going fishing if I don't have my glasses. I can't walk outside and cut my damn grass without sunglasses. So, what have you seen change in the world of eyewear over time of fishing in general, and then kind of what do you think's the future of it?
Yeah, there's been a ton of changes. One of the guys that um, we started working with early on was Rick Murphy, and Rick said he when I was at Costa, he was one of our pros, and he claimed to be the first pro at Costa, and I'll take his word for it. But he he said, I would be out fishing all day, and I'd be fishing in these sunglasses that I'd get at the CVS on the rack there for $10. He said, man, I would get home at night and my eyes would just be killing me, and they'd be red, they'd be hurting, and I didn't really, he said I didn't know anything about like eye protection or UV or any of that kind of stuff. They definitely weren't polarized. But see, he said then Costa came along was the first polarized sunglasses, fishing sunglasses, uh, years ago, and this was probably back in the '80s. And he said I put those things on, and all of a sudden my eyes stopped burning and stopped hurting, and I could see fish better. He said it was a game changer, like it changed my life. um, and so then we introduced at Costa the 580 lens. And so what happened over time, polarization was what was the initial breakthrough, and that just wiped the glare off of the water. UV protection to protect your eyes from hurting and eye disease and all that kind of stuff. Then we introduced something called 580, and that was going from like analog to digital. So what we did was we looked at the light spectrum, and then where the yellow light came through, it was really scratchy and irritated the eye a lot. So that's at 580 nanometers on the light spectrum. And so we came up a guy named Chuck Larson, who didn't work for Costa, but he was a optical dude and got a patent on this technique. But he put this rare earth element called neodymium into the glass, and then that blocked the yellow light at 580 nanometers. And all of a sudden, the eyes relaxed and it got even better. Well, we launched that technology, and I think that's a big part of what built the Costa brand over time. I mean, I named that thing. I remember when it first came out, what are we going to call it? And so, we came up with the name, we marketed it, and it was expensive relative to the other stuff that was out there, but it caught on with fishermen, and it became the lens. And so that really catapulted Costa. Um, then, that was 20 years ago. That's 580 is 20-year-old technology.
Hmm.
That's what they're still using at Costa. But there've been a lot of other developments, and so when I started Bajio, I wanted to do go take it farther and do even more. So we hooked up with a company that does is experts in blue light reduction, and decided not only to block the yellow but to block the blue. And so we blocked 95% of the blue light at 445 nanometers, which is a lot of technical gobbledygook. But what it does is it takes out virtually all the haze. And so when you put them on, you're like, oh my God. When I first put a prototype on, I was like, is there a lens in this thing? I started
Yeah.
tapping, like, why is
That was
everything
my
so clear?
biggest thing, and going back to when I first was presented with like anybody at Bahia was actually Heather had called me and she was
Yeah.
telling me about Bahia. I don't know where she got my name or contact. Actually, I think it was from my buddy Nick. But anyway, she had called me and was telling me about the glasses and all. And that was when I told her, I was like, well, look, I'm about to piss some people off in politics over a redfish down here in Louisiana. And if y'all are behind that, then the sunglasses, I'm sure, will be great. And that's when she was like, oh, well, that is exactly what we want to hear. But then I remember I got the first pair and I put them on and I was like, holy crap. Like, this is the clearest lens I've ever put on. And I've had multiple people tell me that too. It's like I've handed it to them and they're like, I mean, we just all wear sunglasses forever. And they're always like, man, this is so crystal clear. And that's one thing I love about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the overall thing. And so it's you know the lenses continue to develop and get
Hmm.
better over time. And the other thing that we play around with that had not really been done before was just all the layers that are involved in making a lens. You've got the polarized film, you've got coatings, you've got base lens colors, you've got all these different layers. And so when you start playing around with the colors within those layers and the
Hmm.
combination of colors, the combination of layers, some really cool stuff starts to happen. So that's where we came up with the rose lens, the pink one, and the purple lens that we have.
Hmm.
Uh, Everybody was like, look, fishermen are not going to wear a pink lens. I'm like, dude, you let them wear this thing and see what the contrast is
Yeah.
and how much more deeper into the water column they can see fish, and they'll freaking wear it because they're
Oh,
going to
yeah.
catch more. And I remember taking it down to these dudes in the islands, and they were like, "Man, I'm not wearing no pink lens." And so just try it. And then by the end of the trip, they were like, "You got any more of those pink lenses, man? Give me those pink lenses."
Yeah.
So there's a lot of experimentation that can be done with that. So I think we'll continue to evolve. You know, Scratch resistance is a big deal, and
Hmm.
so 80% of what we sell, 75 to 80% is glass lenses.
Hmm.
Uh, because of that, the visual acuity is better on glass as well. Um, it's sort of old school. You can do more crazy stuff with the plastic lenses, but
Yeah.
I still like the glass. But
Yeah.
um,
I've,
but yeah, I think a lot has happened and a lot will continue to happen over the next few years, I think.
yeah, awesome. Well, I got one more for you, and I'll let you get back to it. This is something I've asked pretty much everybody I ever talked to. I think it's a good one just to, just go on about, say whatever you want. What's the one thing that you'd like to see, kind of yourself as well as Bahia remembered by, in the future?
Well, I obviously don't think about that very often. It's just more doing what we want to do. So I think we want to be remembered for being successful at achieving our mission. Uh, and to be recognized or to be remembered, it it honestly is not a big part of the equation. Uh, but being successful at what we're trying to do um, is. And so I hope that we can make a difference in the areas we talked about with youth and with indigenous people and with conditions in local fisheries and the overall environment that's affecting those. I hope we are just beginning on that path that's going to take us to some really significant um, improvements and changes and successes in all that. One of the things that we're working on right now is sargassum, and down in Mexico, there's just 3, 4 feet of it on the beaches. It stinks. It's kills the turtle grass. It kills the mangrove trees. It has all. If your computers, it'll just eat up your computer, your refrigerator. It turns your jewelry black. I mean, it's some nasty
Oh, wow.
stuff. And so we're working with the guy down there, a local Mexican guy who's figured out how to take it and turn it into bricks and then build houses for people who don't have houses.
Oh, wow.
And so we're working with him on that project right now. We're just starting on it. Uh, and there's 29 countries that have bad sargassum problems. They're all caused by climate change and water temperatures increasing, and by cutting down the rainforests in Brazil and dumping fertilizers into the ocean down there. Uh, so there's some bigger global problems, that are affecting it, but we're trying to, help solve. So, hopefully just continuing to work local and work on smaller projects that, through films and through social media and through, you know, people talking to each other, they can expand and actually solve bigger problems or help to. Um, that's something that I hope we can accomplish.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Well, I really appreciate it, man. Well, that's
Yeah,
pretty
Ty,
much.
it's super fun, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate you having us on.
Oh, for sure. And you need to get down here one day. Come down here. We'll go do some fishing. We'll go do some red fishing in the winter. Come down in the summer. We'll go do some jack fishing, whatever. So I'm always trying to get
I'd
Declan
love
down
to.
here.
Well, maybe Declan and I will come down on a trip. I love fishing in Louisiana, and I love fishing for redfish. You can't see it, but out my back window here, uh, 20 feet is Mosquito Lagoon, which is one of the
Oh,
best
that's
redfish.
awesome.
Not as good as Louisiana, probably, but close, and it's getting better because we're cleaning it up
Yeah,
and doing.
that's a success story over there that, I tell people all the time. I'm like, look, there's a place in Florida called the Mosquito Lagoon that basically was a dead fishery that has been turned around. So when people tell me, oh, it's already gone, it's what are you fighting for? I'm like, there's examples all around us, man. And if you're gonna act like that, get the hell out of the way because you're only making it worse.
Yeah, I mean, and it's huge problems. Like people have septic tanks, right? So there's no
Hmm.
city sewers. One of the biggest ways to solve the problem is getting rid of the septic tanks and putting in city sewer. Well, that's tens of millions of dollars. And so there's all these grants that we've gotten, and I haven't done anything on it, but other people have gotten
Hmm.
to, replace all the septics with city sewer.
Oh, wow.
It's a giant infrastructure project. The state of Florida last year gave us $100 million to work on Mosquito Lagoon and 75 million this year to work on Mosquito Lagoon. So now
That's
the
awesome.
awareness is there. We're
Yeah,
starting to invest in it. And man, you can just see the turtle grass coming back.
that's so
It's,
awesome.
I mean, our buddy Declan just caught 45 incher. He's been trying to catch that
Oh,
dude
yeah, he sent me
forever.
that picture a while back.
I think he
Hmm.
sent the whole world that
Oh,
picture.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so the fish are coming back. It's pretty cool.
that's great. Well, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate it for sure and look forward to seeing you again. So, thank you. All right, y'all. Hope y'all enjoyed that. Pretty awesome couple stories. You know me, I love just going down different tangents, different rabbit holes on different things. But pretty awesome stories from Al. Pretty cool to hear how Bajio started. Pretty cool to hear. I mean, that's what I wanted y'all to hear. It's kind of what I was first presented with when dealing with Bajio and their background on it's more than just selling sunglasses. It's about making this place better than how it is now, leaving it better than what it is. And I really love what Al said there at the end. I've asked that question to quite a few people in the multiple different things I've been working on lately, and that's one of the better ones. And hopefully you sit there and think about that a bit. And feel free to let me know if there's anybody else you want to hear and anything else story wise or anything from the industry, fish and tackle and anything like that. I'm gonna obviously keep everything on this podcast centered around redfish. So obviously any of your other requests. Working on something else for getting all those people and outside of Redfish and everything involved with that too. But let me know what you think. Drop a comment or anything, any comments, questions, or anything you want to talk about in that email, the redfishpodcast@gmail.com. And hope you enjoyed this one, and looking forward to hearing from you and seeing you at the next one. Thank you.